In our buzzing, brightly lit world, a truly quiet mind can feel like a distant luxury. We are often told the answer lies in a bottle, but for thousands of years, humanity slept without one. What did they know that we have forgotten? Tonight, we journey back in time. We will uncover 5 lost secrets to slumber, rediscovering the gentle, natural remedies our ancestors used to find peace. If you believe history holds calming wisdom for our modern lives, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. We'd love to read in the comments, what is one non-tech thing you do to help yourself unwind? Welcome to Sleeping Scribe, where calming history stories help you relax and unwind. Our search for these lost secrets begins not on a battlefield or in a palace, but in the quiet, contemplative world of a medieval cloister. Here, the answer to a restless night could be found in the gentle rustle of dried leaves and flowers. Our first secret is a humble creation. It is called the whispering pillow. In medieval Europe, long before manufactured sleep aids, people turned to the wisdom of the earth. Monks, nuns, and village herbalists understood that certain plants held the power to soothe the mind. They would craft simple pillows, filling small linen or cotton bags with a carefully chosen blend of botanicals. These were not merely for a pleasing scent. They were a prescription for calm. The most important ingredient was often hops, the very same plant used to brew beer. For centuries, field workers who harvested hops reported feeling unusually drowsy by the end of the day. Monks and healers took note. They discovered that the plant, with its papery green cones, contained compounds with a mild sedative effect. These compounds, known as humulene and lupulin, interact with the body to encourage relaxation. They quiet the noise. They invite rest. This was not just folk medicine. It was a remedy used by royalty. King George III, a monarch plagued by illness and anxiety, was famously prescribed a pillow filled with hops to help him find sleep. The use of these soporific pillows was championed by figures like Saint Hildegard of Bingen, a brilliant abbess from the 12th century. Hildegard was a writer, a composer, and a keen-eyed herbalist who documented the medicinal properties of the world around her. She understood that a good night's sleep was essential for spiritual and physical health. Alongside hops, other calming herbs were often added to these whispering pillows. Lavender, with its clean and soothing aroma, was a favorite for easing worries. Chamomile flowers, long known for their gentle and sleep-inducing nature, were almost always included. Sometimes, fragrant rose petals were mixed in, adding a touch of sweetness to the blend. The pillow would be tucked just inside the main pillowcase, or placed beside the head, releasing its tranquil scent with every small movement. It was a simple, affordable comfort, available to a farmer who could grow the herbs in his garden, and to a king in his castle. From the gentle herbalism of medieval Europe, our journey now takes us south and further back in time, to a land of gods and pharaohs, where the secret to sleep floated on the sacred waters of the Nile. Our second secret is the pharaoh's blue dream. On the banks of the Nile, a beautiful flower would open its petals each morning to greet the sun, and close them again as dusk fell. This was the blue water lily, often called the blue lotus. To the ancient Egyptians, this was no ordinary plant. It was a sacred symbol of creation and rebirth, a divine key. The flower was deeply connected to Nefertum, the god of perfume, beauty, and the sunrise. It was believed to be a bridge between the physical world and the spiritual realm, and the Egyptians knew it held a special power. The blue lotus contains 2 primary psychoactive alkaloids, a porphyrin and nuciferin. When consumed, these compounds create a unique feeling of tranquil euphoria, a state of peaceful, heightened awareness. It was not a medicine for sleep in the way we think of it today. It was an elixir for the soul. The most common way to use the flower was to soak its petals in wine for several hours. This process gently extracted the active compounds into the liquid, creating a powerful, calming beverage. It was also brewed into a fragrant tea. We see this sacred flower everywhere in Egyptian art. It appears in vibrant tomb paintings and on ancient papyrus scrolls. Egyptians are often depicted holding the flower, raising it to their nose to inhale its scent at banquets and ceremonies. They are shown drinking from cups, likely filled with the infused wine. For them, it was a way to induce a peaceful, dreamlike state. It was a way to feel closer to their gods. The experience was considered a spiritual journey, a gentle release from worldly concerns into a state of blissful calm, a quiet path to a different kind of rest. While the Egyptians sought dreams in a sacred flower, another great empire found its nightly peace in a surprisingly common garden vegetable. Our third secret is the Romang lettuce sedative. It seems almost unbelievable. Lettuce, the crisp and watery foundation of a common salad, was once a potent sleep aid. But the lettuce of the Roman world was very different from our own. They cultivated a variety known as wild lettuce, or Lactuca virosa, and it held a powerful secret. When the stem of this plant is cut, it secretes a milky white fluid. This substance is called lactucarium. Because of its powerful effects, it earned a memorable nickname, lettuce opium. This was not a myth. Roman physicians and scholars were well aware of its properties. Lactucarium is rich in compounds like lactocin and lactocopacrin, which have scientifically recognized analgesic and sedative qualities. They can relieve pain, and they bring on a deep sense of drowsiness. Pliny the Elder, the great Roman naturalist, wrote extensively about the sleep-inducing effects of lettuce in his works, and its use went all the way to the top. According to historical accounts, the first Roman emperor, Augustus, once suffered from a serious illness. His physician prescribed lettuce to treat him, and the emperor recovered. Augustus was so grateful, he reportedly built a statue in the physician's honor, a testament to the healing power of this humble plant. The Romans used it in two primary ways. The simplest method was to eat a large quantity of the lettuce at the end of the evening meal, allowing its gentle sedative effects to prepare them for bed. For a more potent dose, they would score the stems of the plant, carefully collecting the milky lactucarium for a concentrated medicine. Over centuries, the lettuce we eat today has been selectively bred to have almost none of this substance. We chose crispness over calm. We bred out the bitterness, and with it, the plant's ancient, slappy magic. It is a strange thought. The ancestor of our salad green was once a respected Roman sedative. From the practical remedies of Rome, we travel to the birthplace of Western medicine, ancient Greece, where physicians were classifying the power of a humble, earthy root. Our fourth secret is the Greek root of tranquility. Long before it was a capsule in a modern health food store, valerian was one of the most important medicines in the ancient world. The plant, Valeriana officinalis, is a hardy perennial with clusters of sweet-smelling pink or white flowers. But its true power lies hidden. It is buried in the earth, in its gnarled and tangled root. The ancient Greeks were meticulous observers of the natural world. They were among the first to formally document the effects of plants on the human body. The great physician Hippocrates, who lived in the 4th century BC, was one of the first to describe the therapeutic properties of valerian root. But its fame grew even more with Galen of Pergamon. Galen was a prominent Greek physician who later practiced in the Roman Empire, and his medical texts would influence Western medicine for more than 1,000 years. He was a careful diagnostician, a student of the human body. Anyone who has handled the fresh root knows its most famous characteristic, the smell. It is notoriously pungent, earthy, and strong, often compared to old, damp socks. This scent comes from isovaleric acid, a compound that only develops as the root dries. But for the relief it offered, the smell was a small price to pay. Scientists today believe valerian works by gently increasing the levels of a chemical in the brain called GABA. This neurotransmitter helps to regulate nerve impulses, and when its levels are boosted, it has a calming effect on the brain. It puts a brake on anxiety. It helps to turn down the volume on racing thoughts. Because of this, valerian was used for more than just sleep. It was a go-to remedy for what our ancestors called nervous afflictions. This included everything we might now label as anxiety, stress, or even panic. The root's use was remarkably continuous, a thread of botanical wisdom woven through centuries. It was brewed as a decoction, a strong and earthy tea made by simmering the root in water. It was also soaked in alcohol to create a potent tincture. Millennia after the Greeks first documented its use, this same root was given to soldiers during the World Wars, helping them cope with the profound stress of shell shock. From the codified medicine of the Greeks, we journey north to the misty shores of Scandinavia, where hardy Vikings brewed their own simple comforts against the long, dark nights. Our fifth and final secret is the Vikings' night tea. The word Viking often conjures images of fierce warriors and longships sailing for conquest. But they were also farmers, traders, and families. They lived lives grounded in the seasons, in a land of dramatic light and shadow. In the grip of a long, cold, and profoundly dark Scandinavian winter, comfort was essential, and that comfort was often found in a simple, steaming cup. This was not a complex medicine. It was a piece of folk wisdom. Vikings had access to a wealth of wild herbs, and they understood their properties. Two of the most important were likely chamomile and heather. Chamomile, with its small daisy-like flowers, grew wild across the region. We now know that it contains a special antioxidant called apigenin. This compound binds to receptors in the brain, helping to decrease anxiety and initiate sleep. The Vikings didn't know the science. They just knew it worked. They knew that a tea made from the dried flowers brought a feeling of peace. Heather was another key ingredient. Its tough, wiry branches and purple flowers carpeted the northern landscape. In Nordic folk traditions, heather was known as a mild sedative, a calming agent. It was also used to support urinary health, which could help prevent sleep from being interrupted. A simple infusion of heather flowers would have provided a warm, slightly floral drink to soothe the body and mind. Archaeological finds from Viking settlements have included preserved remains of these very plants, confirming their importance in daily life. This was not a powerful potion. It was a domestic ritual, a small act of self-care against the harshness of the world outside. It was the wisdom of a people who knew how to find warmth in the darkness, a practice that endures today every time we brew a simple cup of herbal tea before bed. These 5 secrets reveal a world deeply connected to natural rhythms, but the remedies were only part of the story. The very nature of night itself was different. Now that our initial question is answered, let us settle in, dim the lights, and drift deeper. Let's explore what a night truly felt like, long before the glow of a single screen, and immerse ourselves in the forgotten world of historical sleep. Our journey now leads us into the realm of absolute darkness. For most of human history, the night was black, truly black. It was a deep, velvety, and profound darkness that we can no longer experience. Light pollution has stolen it from us, but our ancestors lived within it. When the sun went down, the world transformed. The primary source of light for a city was fire, and fire was dangerous. This led to the curfew, a word from the old French couvre-feu, which literally means cover fire. At the sound of a bell, citizens were required to extinguish their lamps and cover the embers in their hearths to prevent a stray spark from burning the town to the ground. Artificial light was a luxury. Beeswax candles, which burned clean and bright, were incredibly expensive. They were reserved for the church and for the very wealthy. Most people, if they had any light at all, used smoky, foul-smelling tallow candles made from animal fat. Or they used simple rushes dipped in grease, which gave off a weak, flickering glow. For the vast majority, the setting of the sun meant the end of all light. In this immense quiet, other senses grew sharp. Hearing became acute. Every sound was magnified. The creak of a floorboard, the sigh of the wind in the thatched roof, the distant call of a fox. To provide reassurance, cities employed a night watchman. You could hear his footsteps on the cobblestones, and his voice calling out the hours, assuring the sleeping citizens that all is well. This darkness was also filled with fear. Folklore was rich with spirits, demons, and creatures that stalked the night. The darkness outside the sturdy walls of the home was a place of tangible danger, both real and imagined. This made the home a true sanctuary. Inside, the only light, the only warmth, often came from the glowing embers of the central hearth. It was the heart of the home, a focal point for safety and togetherness after dark. And without the glare of city lights, the sky was astonishing. The Milky Way was not a faint smudge. It was a brilliant, shimmering river of light across the heavens. The constellations were sharp and clear, used by farmers and travelers for timekeeping, for navigation, and for wonder. This deep, unbroken darkness didn't just change what people saw. It fundamentally changed the very rhythm of how they slept. Waking in the middle of the night wasn't seen as a disorder, but as a normal and useful part of a hidden sleep cycle. This was the gift of two sleeps. For centuries, if not millennia, most people in the Western world did not sleep in one long consolidated block. They slept in two distinct phases. This practice was so common, it was simply considered the normal way to sleep. It was only in the late 20th century that a historian named Roger Eckerch uncovered the extent of this forgotten pattern. In his book, At Day's Close, he revealed a wealth of evidence for what was known as segmented sleep. References appeared everywhere once he knew what to look for. In literature, in court documents, in personal diaries, and in letters. Authors from Chaucer to Plutarch mentioned it. People spoke of their first sleep, or in Latin, primo somno. This first sleep would begin shortly after dusk and last for several hours. Then, sometime after midnight, people would naturally wake. This period of gentle, quiet wakefulness was not a source of anxiety. It was known as the watch, or in French, the door veil. It was a peaceful and productive interlude, lasting for an hour or more, before they returned to bed for their second sleep, which would continue until dawn. This was a unique time, a quiet space between the two sleeps. It was a period of stillness and introspection that has been completely lost to the modern world. People used this time for many things. They would pray or meditate on their sins. They would reflect on the dreams from their first sleep, trying to understand their meanings. Couples would talk quietly, sharing an intimacy that the busy daylight hours did not allow. It was also a practical time. People would perform small, quiet chores by the light of the moon or the hearth, like mending a garment or tending to the fire. This waking period was not a burden. It was considered a special, contemplative gift, when the mind was clear and the world was still. So what changed? The Industrial Revolution. And with it, the proliferation of bright, affordable artificial light. First came gaslight in the cities, pushing social life later and later into the evening. Then came the electric bulb, vanquishing the darkness entirely. Suddenly, people were going to bed later, but still had to rise early for factory work. This new pressure squeezed the night. The gentle, hour-long pause of the watch became an inconvenience. Sleep was compressed into one single unbroken block, and a new, modern anxiety was born, the fear of waking at 3 in the morning. We now see it as a sign of insomnia, a disorder to be fixed. But history suggests it may not be a disorder at all. It may just be an echo of a sleep pattern that was once perfectly normal, a ghost of our body's natural rhythm. This different pattern of sleep took place in spaces that were also profoundly different from our own. Let us now pull back the heavy curtains and step into the historical bedroom, a space often more communal and cozy than private. For much of history, the idea of a private bedroom was a luxury reserved for the very wealthy. In a typical peasant cottage or artisan's home, the entire family often slept in the same room. Sometimes they even slept in the same bed. This was not just to save space, it was for warmth and security. On a cold winter night, sharing body heat was a matter of survival. Sharing a room also meant being able to protect one another from any potential danger in the dark. The bed itself has a long history. For many, it was a simple pallet, a cloth sack stuffed with straw or dried heather, laid directly on the floor. It had to be regularly changed to prevent it from becoming damp and bug-infested. If you were more fortunate, you might have a feather bed, a wonderfully soft mattress filled with goose or duck feathers. It was a sign of comfort and status, but required constant fluffing to keep its shape. The most iconic piece of furniture was the four-poster bed. This was the possession of the well-to-do. With its grand wooden frame and thick, heavy curtains, it was more than just a place to sleep. It was a room within a room. When the curtains of wool or velvet were drawn shut, it created a small, private chamber. This space trapped body heat, keeping the sleepers warm against the biting cold of an unheated room. It also offered privacy in a world where very little was private. One famous example, the Great Bed of Ware, built in the 16th century, was so enormous it could supposedly sleep 4 couples at once. Getting into a cold bed was deeply unpleasant. To combat this, people used bed warmers. These were long-handled pans, usually made of brass, with a hinged lid. They would be filled with hot coals from the hearth, and then slid carefully between the linen sheets to warm them before climbing in. For families with servants or many children, there was the truckle bed. A low bed on wheels, it was designed to be stored away underneath a larger master bed during the day. At night, it could be rolled out for a child or a personal servant to sleep on. In an age without banks or safes, people also slept close to their most valuable possessions, often keeping a locked chest at the foot of the bed, or even in the bed itself. Tucked away in these dark rooms, within these curtained beds, the mind was free to wander. But in a world steeped in faith and folklore, dreams were rarely just dreams. They were messages, omens, and journeys into another world. This brings us to our final exploration, a tapestry of dreams. In the pre-modern world, the line between the sleeping mind and the spiritual world was thin. Dreams were not seen as random firings of the brain. They were seen as meaningful experiences, full of potent symbolism. The ancient Greeks personified dreams, giving them form and name. They believed in Morpheus, the god of dreams, who could shape and send visions to mortals. He had two brothers, Phobeter, who crafted frightening nightmares, and Phantasos, who created fantastical, non-human dreams. Interpreting these messages was a serious art, known as oneiromancy. Great books, like the Onero Critica by Artemidorus, were written as dictionaries to help people decode the meaning of their nightly visions. This belief in the power of dreams was a cornerstone of many faiths. In the Bible, dreams are a primary way for God to communicate with humanity. Joseph rose to power in Egypt by interpreting the Pharaoh's dreams of cattle and corn. Jacob dreamed of a great ladder reaching to heaven. These were not fantasies. They were prophecies. In the medieval period, the view of dreams grew darker. The night was a time when the soul was vulnerable. People believed in the incubus and succubus, malevolent demons that were thought to visit people in their sleep. In fact, our word nightmare comes from this very belief. It has nothing to do with a female horse. It comes from the mare, a malicious spirit from old Germanic folklore. This goblin was said to sit upon a sleeper's chest, causing feelings of terror and suffocation. Dreams could change the course of history. A king might alter his battle plans based on a prophetic dream. A farmer might decide where to plant his crops based on an omen from his sleep. They were taken seriously. They were discussed with family in the morning or during the quiet wakefulness of the watch. They were a shared map to the mysterious landscape of the human soul. As our journey through the nights of the past comes to a peaceful close, we are reminded that for most of history, sleep was not an inconvenience to be conquered, but a rich and mysterious world to be entered. Perhaps we can carry a piece of that quiet darkness and gentle wisdom with us into our own nights. May your rest be deep, your mind be calm, and your dreams be peaceful. Until next time, on Sleeping Scribe, sleep well.